morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome again to another session of Let's Read Northern Lights. Again, this is your host for tonight, Pixel Broadside, otherwise known as Pinoy and Victoria. Welcome all, welcome all. I have basically started on this again as a bit of a change. Wanted to see, and this one really wasn't what I really wanted to do. Um, it's just one of those things that I wanted to try at the very least. Anyway, ignoring all of that, we have finished with the introduction, and now we're going to go into the entries of Northern Lights. And this time we are going to start with the first one. It is going to be The Sacrifice by Adele Wiseman. So, again, sit back, relax, maybe find and get a warm cup of tea. Join me for another short session of Northern Lights. The Sacrifice by Adele Wiseman. Chapter 1. The train was beginning to slow down again, and Abraham noticed lights in the distance. He shifted his body only slightly so as not to disturb the boy, and sank back into the familiar pattern of throbbing aches inflicted by the wheels below. A dim glow from the corridor outlined the other figures in the day coach as they slept, sprawled in attitudes of discomfort and fatigue. He tried to close his eyes and lose himself in the thick, dream-crowded stillness, but his eyelids, prickly with weariness, sprang open again. Urgently, the train howled the warning of its approach to the city. Facing him, Abraham's wife seemed to seize the same wailful note and draw it out plaintively as she sighed in her sleep. Her body huddled, strained, and unnatural on the faded green plush seat. He could feel the boy, slack and completely pliant, rolling to the motion of the train. The whistle howled again, the carriage jolted, and his son lurched heavily, almost lifelessly against him. Enough! With a sudden rush of indignation, as though he had been jerked awake, it came to Abraham that they had fled far enough. The thought took hold in his mind like a command. It came alive in his head and swept through him angrily, in a wave of energy, a rebellious movement of the blood. It was as simple as this. Enough. He must act now. He sat up carefully, shifting Isaac's limp form into another position, fired in his new determination by the boy's weak, protesting mumble. Slowly, he stretched, feeling his joints crackle, pulling the cramp out of his body. He looked about him impatiently. As though summoned, the conductor entered the coach. Abraham turned his head and beckoned imperatively. "Where are we?" he asked in Ukrainian, tentatively, his red eyes gleaming with excitement, his loud voice muted to a hoarse whisper. The man stooped, his face polite, questioning, and to Abraham offensively vacant in its non-comprehension. "I beg your pardon," he said in English. "Where are we stopping, please?" Abraham asked urgently in Yiddish, speaking slowly and patiently so that the man must understand. The conductor shook his head. "No speak, no speak," he said, pointing to Abraham's mouth, then to his own with a deprecating gesture. Abraham looked at the man with irritation. Was there anyone on the train who could do anything but make faces and smile? "Why does the train stop?" he asked suddenly, hopefully, in Polish. The conductor shook his head helplessly. Abraham leaned forward and gestured wildly towards the window to where the lights blinked in the distance. The conductor, as though realizing something, smiled a broad, reassuring smile, shook his head vigorously, patted Abraham lightly on the arm, and made as if to move on. "The train! Stop! Why? What city?" roared the Jew in exasperation, spitting out the words in broken German. At the sound, his son jerked suddenly awake, frightened, and looked blindly about for a moment. Other passengers groaned, steered their numb bones, and mumbled in protest. The conductor swayed on down the car, shrugging apologetically at drowsy faces. Animals here, muttered Abraham, subsiding and turning helplessly to his son. They can only gibber and gesticulate. What's the matter, Pa? Isaac yawned. Can't you sleep? No. With a gesture, he flung aside the overcoat he had used as a cover. The train is stopping. We're getting off. But we have 2 more days. Who awaits us? There was no answer to this that the boy knew of. Who awaited them? What awaited them? It did not really matter whether they stopped here blindly or went blindly on to the other city for which they had bought the tickets. Isaac crouched for another moment and watched his father, who was collecting their bundles. His own limbs were so knotted that it took him a moment to gather his strength to get out from under his warm coat and stretch. The conductor called out the name of the city. No, enough, I said Abraham. 15 months and 11 days. If I had to spend more nights and nights worrying about a new beginning, I would not have the strength to begin. 2 more days and nights in this position, and this whole human being that you call your father will make sense only to an upholsterer. I do not know where we will sleep tomorrow, but at least our beds will lie flat and we will rock no more. But our tickets! Isaac rubbed his eyes with numb fingers and shook his head to clear his thoughts. Ah, our tickets. Abraham scratched the itching skin under his forked beard reflectively. Well, it's senseless trying to explain anything to that fellow. Listen to him. He can't answer a simple question. And now he wakes up the whole train with his shouting up and down. Well, I suppose he can't help himself. Would I have understood him even if he had understood me? Strength and humor returned with his decision. He moved around and stretched. His blood began to circulate again. Like a young man entering deliberately into an adventure, he felt excited at making a positive gesture in the ordering of his fate. In fact, come to think of it, we'll be saving money. If we get off here, we save the rest of our fare. So, just in case they're not clamoring for a butcher and I don't get a job here right away, we'll save that much more money to live on in the meantime. That's why it's such a good idea to get off here. You see, your father has not lost his common sense. In fact, it's a wise decision I have made with God's help, and we can see about our tickets in the station. Lights flashed by. At the other end of the car, a young couple were gathering their belongings. The important thing now, Abraham continued, is that we must stop running from death and from every other insult. We will seize our lives in these scarred hands again. Paused to consider his words with pleasure. Come, boy, we must wake your mother, but gently. How wary she is. When the train grunted to a halt, Abraham and his family, his wife blinking and shivering with sleep, stood among the few waiting with their bundles in their arms. The conductor, noticing the group assembled to leave, rushed up to them. No, no, no! He shook his head and reached for Abraham's suitcase. This isn't your stop. Abraham brushed his arm away firmly. Shalom, he said politely, yet with a certain fierceness that prevented the conductor from persisting. They descended to the platform. The conductor stood shaking his head in exasperation over these immigrants. Abraham cast him a last forgiving glance. As though it was written, he could see what they must do. First, to find the immigration barracks, to sleep at last without the artificial pulse of engines to remind them, even in sleep, that they were wanderers. Then, with the new day, to settle themselves gingerly on the crust of the city, perhaps someday even to send down a few roots. Those roots, pre-numbed and shallow, of the often uprooted, but strong. Abraham felt strength surge up in him, excitement shaking the tiredness out of his body. No matter what it is done to the plant, when it falls again it will send out the tentative roots to the earth and rise upward again to the sky. The boy was young, the boy was blessed, the boy would grow. Isaac shifted his bundle uncomfortably under curious stares and raised his eyes upward in a head in imitation of the oblivious purpose of his father. He moved stiffly, aware of the difference in dress between these people and himself, and listened, lonely among the strange rhythms about him, for voices of warmth. That morning they had found a place to live, and now they were bringing their belongings to install in the room. Isaac thought of the new home with trepidation, perhaps not so much in spite of, but because of the fact that the landlady had told him happily that she had two daughters just his age. What would two native girls think of him? What if they were like their mother? Two garrulous girls with sharp noses and tips, moving like rabbits, incessantly up and down as they talked. Sarah, Isaac's mother, who had lived for months as in a dream, found herself hypnotized, watching the face of Mrs. Poplar as she talked. When the woman addressed her persuasively, woman to woman, reiterating the merits of this furnished room with its bed, its couch, its bureau, its chair, and its big window, she merely nodded up and down, unthinking. The landlady was a thin, flat-fronted woman with nothing to draw the eye from her hyperactive nose other than a head of tightly grizzled hair that started upward from her hair in a stiff, small waves. As she talked, she examined her prospective roomers and saw that they were no longer young. This straight-backed Jew, with his beard thrust forward, as though starched away from his chest, and his wide-eyed, unresponsive wife. Still talking, she swept her eyes over their pale adolescent son, who stood looking at her in a way which she found vaguely irritating. Her eyes took in their portable belongings. She concluded that they were lucky to get a room, and, reminding them again they would have the benefit of a furnished room with a bed, a couch, a bureau, a chair, and a big window, as well as kitchen and bathroom facilities, which they would share with her family, she asked for her rent in advance. Half an hour after they were securely installed and she had their rent pinned away warmly, their landlady was telling a neighbor how she had taken a poor immigrant family into the house practically right off the train, and how she had made them feel immediately at home. Why? They're taking baths already. Shortly afterwards, she met her adolescent daughters at the door with whispered news that she had rented the room to an immigrant family with a son of about 16, who, however, didn't look like much, but that they would nevertheless have to stop running about the house half naked in the mornings. She added that the tenants had taken baths already, three separate baths, and that she had served them tea in the kitchen, and had gleaned that their father was a butcher. At present, she told the girls, they were asleep after their long trip. Leaving her daughters at home, two overgrown girls who began to wander up and down outside the room, pausing to giggle and listen and giggle at the door of their tenants, she went off to shop for supper. At the grocery, she mentioned that she had taken an immigrant family into her house, people she knew nothing about, that they had taken baths already, that she had served them tea, that the husband was a butcher, that they were resting at present, and that it was hard for two families to share one bathtub. When her husband came home, she told him that they had finally rented the furnished room to an immigrant family, that the husband was a butcher who didn't have a job yet, though they'd paid rent in advance, that they were at present asleep in their room, that they had taken their baths already, and that she wondered how often they intended to take baths during the week, all three of them. You have to show them that we have bathtub right away, said her husband, who was a joker and a jolly good fellow at the party, but surly with his secret grievances at home. Well, it's by the toilet, she defended herself. They would have found out anyway. And besides, it's because of the long train ride that they bathe. They're greenhorns. They won't want to bathe very often. You know how filthy these people are apt to be. We have too much hot water for you, he grumbled. She served them tea too, chimed in Gertie and Goldie eagerly, happy for some diversion after having palpitated around the house all afternoon in vain. The Poplars waited to get a glimpse of their tenants, But Abraham and his family slept on until the evening. Then the Ploplers noted that the lights went on and heard their voices murmuring, the man's louder than the rest. But they couldn't catch the words. From the moving about, they assumed that the new tenants were unpacking and putting the room in order. Possibly even they were eating something from one of their outlandish bundles. Then the lights went out. Certainly sleep a lot, commented their landlord. Why didn't knock on the door and ask them if they wanted anything is beyond me. I think I have as much right to see them as you have. I go out in the morning and come back to find half my house rented away, and nobody thinks to introduce me to my new tenants. Nobody thinks fit to ask me if maybe, in my opinion, that they're not suitable for tenants in my house. Who rents a room just like that? Why didn't you tell me when the lights were on to knock on the door? Said his wife. You think they'd come out by themselves to be sociable. They know I have a husband. Thank you for telling them you have a husband. What are they hiding themselves away for? Maybe they're tired, suggested one of the girls. I'm tired too, said her father. So what? What does the sun look like? Asked the other girl, who had heard at least half a dozen times over. They both listened eagerly while their mother described how thin and wretched looking the boy he was, but not, for all that, entirely ugly. The landlord resigned himself suddenly to waiting till morning. And that is it for now. It is just a small part of the first chapter of The Sacrifice by Adele Wiseman. Hopefully, in a few days, we can proceed with the rest of the chapter. I hope that you enjoyed my reading of this so far. Again, I'm still trying to get used to this format. Um, but yeah, it is nice because I am also experiencing this with you. This is the first time I've read the story, so it's always fun to read something new like this. Anyway, if you like my reading, please leave a like and subscribe. And hopefully, those who have sat with me through this experience will join me as I proceed through the rest of the chapter. Again, this is Pixel Broadside, otherwise known as Pinoy and Victoria. Thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you then, same time, same channel. You take care, and bye bye. And see you hopefully soon again in another session. You take care.